Imagine committing a crime, and realizing too late that the world had just watched you do it. That's exactly what happened on one fateful night in 2020. It started with a teenage feud, a social media challenge, and a dangerous sense of invincibility. 16-year-old Joshua Purcell went live on Instagram, walking through the streets, daring his enemies to show themselves. But what he didn't realize was that his biggest rival was already watching, and getting ready to act. Dankes Anderson saw the live stream. He saw the threats. He saw Joshua approaching. And then, he picked up a gun. Minutes later, gunshots echoed through the night. Joshua collapsed. His phone hit the ground. But the live stream kept going. Hundreds, if not thousands, had witnessed his final moments in real time. Now, the biggest question remained, was this self-defense or something much darker? As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking truth, one that even the killer himself wasn't ready to face. This wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the result of a long, bitter war, one that had been escalating for months. And like most wars, it started with one unforgivable act. A month before Joshua Purcell lost his life, his close friend, Knowledge Gibson, made a dangerous move. He stormed into the Anderson household, a gun in hand, and pointed it straight at Dankes' mother's head. His demand? Bring out Daniel Anderson, Dankes' younger brother. The police arrived just in time, preventing what could have been another tragedy. But the psychological damage? That was irreversible. From that moment, violence wasn't just an option, it was an expectation. Joshua and his group wanted payback. The Andersons wanted revenge. Every encounter, every insult, every challenge on social media only pushed them further down a path they couldn't turn back from. Then came the night of July 15, 2020. Joshua, feeling emboldened, decided to take matters into his own hands. He pulled out his phone, went live on Instagram, and sent a message to everyone watching. He wasn't afraid. He was coming to the Andersons' house. It was supposed to be a show of strength. But what Joshua didn't realize was that he wasn't just performing for his friends, he was performing for his killer. Dankes Anderson saw the live stream. He saw the threats. And in that moment, he had to make a choice. What would you have done? Would you have brushed it off as empty talk? Would you have stayed inside, knowing that your enemies were approaching? Or would you have done what Dankes did, picked up a gun and walked out the door? By the time Joshua and his friends reached the church parking lot, their fate was already sealed. And the whole world was about to watch it unfold. In the next part, we'll walk through every chilling detail, the live stream, the confrontation, and the final moments that were captured for the world to see. The streets were empty, the only sound was the faint echo of laughter. Joshua Purcell and his two friends walked with purpose, their energy high. But the real action wasn't on the street, it was on Instagram Live. Joshua was performing. For his friends. For the viewers. For anyone who dared to challenge him. They don't want this smoke, he muttered into the camera. The comments poured in, laughing emojis, fire emojis, words of encouragement. His followers were eating it up. But there was one person watching who wasn't laughing. Dankes Anderson sat at home, phone in hand, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. He wasn't typing. He wasn't reacting. He was making a decision. Joshua had just unknowingly invited his own executioner to the show. Dankes put down the phone. He grabbed a gun. He stepped outside. Minutes later, Joshua and his friends reached the church parking lot, right in Dankes' path. And then, out of nowhere, gunfire. Chaos. Screams. The camera shook, fell to the ground. The live stream continued, but now the screen only showed pavement, blurry, distorted. But the sound was crystal clear. Joshua was running. His friends had already taken off. But the bullets kept coming. One hit his back. Another struck his shoulder. Joshua collapsed. His body hit the pavement with a sickening thud. But it wasn't over. 3 more shots. The sound of footsteps. Someone standing over him. And then, silence. The live stream flickered, and then, black. For the thousands of people watching, the screen had simply gone dark. But for Joshua, that darkness was forever. But here's the twist, Dankas had no idea he had just incriminated himself. He thought he had gotten away with it. But the live stream had captured everything. And when he found out, his reaction was something no one could have predicted. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you even more. When police arrived at the scene, they saw what looked like just another street shooting. A young man, barely 16, lay dead in a parking lot. A few bullet casings littered the ground. Witnesses murmured, reluctant to talk. But this wasn't a typical case. Because this murder had already been witnessed, by hundreds of people. The officers didn't know it yet, but somewhere, saved on a phone, was the live stream that would expose everything. It didn't take long for someone to hand it over. And the moment detectives pressed play, everything changed. The screen flickered to life. Joshua was there, laughing, taunting, walking toward his fate. Then, gunfire. Screams. The sound of someone running. Then more gunshots. And finally, silence. The phone had captured his own death. Now, the focus of the investigation shifted entirely. The video held clues that no crime scene ever could, the voices, the movements, the reactions. And soon, names started surfacing in the comments. People were talking. One name kept coming up. Dankas Anderson. Police started digging. And it didn't take long for the first crack in his alibi to appear. His family swore up and down that he was nowhere near the crime. His brothers even tried covering for him, saying he had been at a friend's house. But digital evidence told a different story. Investigators pulled Instagram logs. The records didn't just show that Dankas had watched the live stream, they showed that he was logged in when the murder happened. Then came security footage. Officers scanned the area and soon found a shadowy figure, creeping down the street minutes before the shots were fired. There was no doubt now. Dankas Anderson had been there. And so, police made their move. A few days later, a knock came at the Anderson family's door. Officers stood outside, ready to take Dankas in. What would he say? Would he try to lie his way out? Or was the weight of what he had done finally catching up to him? Stay with me, because next, we're diving into the high-stakes interrogation where Dankas faced the truth he could no longer escape. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The walls of the interrogation room weren't just holding Dankas Anderson inside, they were closing in on him. For hours, he sat across from the detective, trying to keep his composure. But with every passing second, it became harder to ignore the mountain of evidence piling up against him. You weren't at your friend's house, the detective started. We know that. We also know you were watching the live stream. Dankas barely reacted. The detective continued. We have security footage. We have phone records. And we have witness statements. Still, Dankas said nothing. Then, the detective dropped the biggest bombshell of all. Your own brother told us everything. A slight twitch. A shift in his chair. The first crack in his defense. He told us how you saw the live. How you grabbed a gun. How you left the house. The detective leaned in. How you didn't come home that night. Dankas shook his head. Danny don't know what he's talking about. But he did. The silence stretched. The detective let it hang there, giving Dankas time to process the reality of his situation. Then, the final push. Look, I get it. They threatened your family. You felt like you had to do something. But what happened next? That's what we need to understand. Dankas exhaled slowly. His shoulders dropped slightly. For the first time, his confidence wavered. He looked at the detective. His lips parted, like he was about to say something. And then, he stopped himself. Silence. The detective sighed. All right. If you want to sit here and pretend none of this is real, go ahead. But I'll tell you what's real. The evidence. The video. The fact that this isn't going away. And with that, they left him alone. No way out. No one to turn to. Just him and the truth waiting to be spoken. But when he finally did talk, it wasn't what anyone expected. Because his confession changed everything. Stay with me, because in the next part, the truth finally comes out. Dankas Anderson had spent hours trying to hold it together. Trying to deny, to deflect, to avoid. But deep down, he knew, the walls were closing in. Then, the door opened. His mother walked in. The room went silent. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She just looked at him, with a face full of pain and disappointment. And in that moment, Dankas knew, it was over. Tell them, she said softly. Stop lying and just tell them. For the first time since he sat down, Dankas lowered his head. He took a deep breath. And then, he broke. I saw the live, he mumbled. His words came slowly at first, hesitant, but once they started, they didn't stop. He admitted to watching Joshua's live stream. To seeing the threats. To hearing his name. To grabbing a gun. To stepping outside. I thought he had a gun, he muttered. The detective pressed. Did you see one? Dankas hesitated. His breathing was uneven. I don't know, he admitted. Then came the question that changed everything. If you were scared, if you were just trying to stop him, why did you keep shooting? Even when he was down. Dankas froze. His mother closed her eyes. The weight of it hit him all at once. He swallowed. I don't know. But the evidence did know. The forensic reports. The trajectory of the bullets. The cold, hard fact that Joshua had been executed at close range. Self-defense? Maybe at first. But by the time Dankas stood over Joshua and fired those last 3 shots, it was murder. But what would the jury think? And how much time would Dankas spend behind bars? In the next part, the trial begins, and the final judgment is made. When the courtroom fell silent, the verdict was read. Dankas Anderson had tried to argue self-defense. His lawyers claimed he acted out of fear, that he truly believed Joshua was armed. But the prosecution had something stronger, cold, hard facts. The live stream had captured no visible weapon on Joshua. Ballistics showed 3 execution-style shots while Joshua was already down. His own brother's testimony placed Dankas at the scene with a gun in hand. The jury made their decision. On December 1, 2023, Dankas Anderson was sentenced to 15 years in prison for second-degree murder. 10 years of probation after his release. But here's the real question, who really won? Joshua is gone forever. His family will never see him again. Dankas will lose 15 years of his life behind bars, 15 years he could have spent building a future. This isn't just a crime story. It's a tragedy. A warning. A lesson that came too late. Because the truth is, this didn't have to happen. What if Joshua never went live? What if Dankas stayed inside? What if someone stepped in before it was too late? This case reminds us that violence is never the answer. What do you think? Was the sentence fair? Or should things have ended differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dive crime stories like this, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay tuned. Because there are more stories out there that need to be told.